So I want to start by reading from a poem called The Spell by a poet named Marie Howe. Every day when I pick up my 4-year-old daughter from preschool, she climbs into her back booster seat and says, "Mom, tell me your story." And almost every day I tell her, I dropped you off, I taught my class, I ate a tuna fish sandwich, wrote emails, returned phone calls, talked with students, and then I came to pick you up. And almost every day I think, my God, is that what I did? Yesterday she climbed into the back seat and said, "Mom, tell me your story." And I did what I always did. I said I dropped you off, taught my class, had lunch, returned emails, talked with students. And she said, "No, Mom, tell me the whole thing." And I said, "Okay, I feel a little sad." And she said, "Tell me the whole thing, Mom." And I said, "Okay, Elise died. Elise is dead, and the world feels weary and brokenhearted." And she said, "Tell me the whole thing, Mom." And I said, "In my dream last night, I felt my life building up around me, and when I stepped forward and away from it and turned around, I saw a high and frozen crested wave." And she said, "The whole thing, Mom." And then I thought of the other dream. I said when a goose landed heavily on my head, but when I'd untangled it from my hair, I saw it wasn't a goose at all, but a winged serpent, writhing up into the sky like a disappearing bee. And she said, "Tell me the whole story." And I said, "Elise is dead, and all the frozen tears are mine, of course. And if that wave broke, it might wash my life clear, and I might begin again from now and from here." And I looked into the rearview mirror. She was looking sideways out the window to the right, where they say the unlived life is. "Okay," I said. And she said, "Okay," still looking in that direction. I read that poem today because I want to reflect for a moment on a small phrase in the middle of the gospel. "Physician, heal yourself." In Greek, the word heal is therapeution, like give therapy, give medicine to yourself. Jesus calls it a proverb, or it's translated as proverb, but the Greek word is parable, which is kind of an interesting use of the word parable. You know, if you might remember from the classes that we taught on parables last year, that a parable means bringing alongside of, or a comparison. Like you have this standard, and then you lay something else alongside it to compare things like size and weight. So in parables, you are comparing. So in this case, Jesus is, in fact, comparing himself to a physician. And he's saying that the crowds want him to do the healing that he has done elsewhere, and like in Capernaum. There in their midst. He wants that healing for them. They want that healing for them. Now, remember that this passage is really a continuation of the proclamation of the Jubilee that Jesus read last week from Isaiah with its echoes from Leviticus. Today I proclaim to you a release, good news to the poor, liberation. And so this week we see the crowd's reaction. And they're filled initially with wonder and astonishment at what they say is the words of grace that came from his mouth. Here's this kid from Nazareth, they say. We know his father. Part of that reaction seems to be, at least the way Jesus is reading the crowds, a little resentful, and a wish to receive the messianic blessings that the neighboring towns have received. But I also want to hear that parable, "Physician, heal thyself," as directed to me, or perhaps at all of us who strive to be healers in whatever ways that we struggle to heal. For example, parents, you bind the wounds of your children and you comfort them in their heartbreak. You are healers. Or for you who work in the marketplace, in businesses of various sorts, you go out to work amongst others, and aren't there times where people come to you and you are a listening ear for one of your coworkers or friends? Or are there times when you have had to make peace amongst those around you? You too play the role of healer. Those who advocate and work for justice, who strive to bind the wounds of those who are victims of injustice, of poverty and violence and exclusion. See, the role of healer is not just reserved for my profession. And so we too can ponder this parable, physician, heal yourself. And it's interesting how corporate Jesus interprets this phrase. I mean, how much he says in his healing of yourself, not just his body or his mind, but the bodies of his hometown, of his home synagogue. Why do you go away, he thinks the crowds are saying, when there are wounds here among us? So let me get back to that poem from which I started. Some of you might know that this year I am doing a fellowship called Contemplative Medicine. And in it we are being taught to use contemplative spirituality and prayer and meditation to help us with the suffering that we encounter in our clinical practice. The fellows have become a community, and we are mostly doctors, but there's also a nurse midwife and a couple of nurse practitioners and at least one physician assistant. And it really has been transformative for me this year and really kind of a godsend during this COVID thing. So the poem that I read was actually read to us. And we were asked, how do you suffer? And the way we were asked was this. We were paired up. This is all on Zoom, so it's a sort of online. But we were paired up with our partner. And we would ask of our partner, how do you suffer? And they would say whatever they would say. And when they would pause, we would say, thank you. How do you suffer? And we went on. And I said things like, well, I get worried about the future. And I'm afraid of abandonment. I sometimes try to avoid my suffering. And deeper we would go. And then it was my turn, and I asked my partner, how do you suffer? And the point of that exercise was to go deeper, to not leave things out, to articulate what's not just the surface, but the deep. Just like Marie Howe's daughter asks her in that seemingly innocent and sweet way, no, Mom, tell me the whole thing. And the point of that is to be able to sit with our own wounds and with our suffering. Because if I can do that, then I can be with the wounds of my patients, their physical wounds, their emotional wounds, their spiritual wounds. And that can be very good medicine. In our story, Jesus is led out by the crowds because they are wounded and they are angry. And they want medicine. And it's like Jesus doesn't even seem to see them. They lead him out into the wilderness and even to a cliff. It reminded me of the scapegoat who was led out to the wilderness in Leviticus 16, led to the edge of the wilderness and to set free there with all the people's sins and their wounds piled upon its back. Now, I know the way that we traditionally read that story, it's a little hard to have compassion for the crowds, but I'm really tempted to do so. What is Jesus' point in provoking them? So I thought about it, and I think for me the point is this, and I need to tell you something else before I get to the actual point. So the parable or proverb that Jesus uses, this physician, heal thyself, is actually found in another rabbinical text. It's in a rabbinical midrash or commentary on the book of Genesis. And one of the themes of that commentary is that God is compassionate. And the rabbis tell story after story of being compassionate to one another so that God will be compassionate to us. That we incarnate God's spirit of compassion to one another and God visits us. There's this one story where the rabbi tells his people who are suffering through something, I can't remember, like a drought or a famine, or even it could have been like an epidemic of some sort. And the rabbi proclaims a fast. And first the fast lasts for 5 days and things don't get better. And so then he goes out to 10 days and then it's a couple weeks. And finally, he's like, okay, forget it. Forget the fast. Our God is compassionate. Let's be compassionate to one another, and God will come and visit us. So is that maybe the point of our story? Remember, like I said, Jesus has just proclaimed this year of release, this year of liberation, good news to the poor, freedom for captives, forgiveness of debt and debt slavery. Perhaps the crowds in their anger forgot that part of the message. They saw the healing, but forgot their role in the healing. Because, we can sometimes be so wrapped up in our own narrow worldviews, our own opinions, our own judgments and judgmentalism, that we forget to widen out, to embrace the whole story. And that includes our own. For when we forget the whole story of our suffering, we sometimes fixate on the wrong things. If I could just get a little more money, or if I could just get that promotion, or if I could just get rid of these masks, or if I could just get that other job over there, then my sadness would leave. And my emptiness would depart, and I would be free. That's what we think. But maybe the problem's not with our money, or with our job, or with this relationship or that. But maybe there's something deeper, something missing, something we are overlooking or forgetting. How do you suffer? Thank you. How do you suffer? There is medicine in meditating on that. How can we widen out and go deeper? And in doing so, put on a new heart of generosity and gratitude. Jesus' message is not, come to me and I'm a dispenser of magic. Rather, he came to change our hearts, to have us put on a new heart of love and compassion. There is medicine in the generous and grateful heart that one could put on when we hear of Jesus' proclamation of the Jubilee time, this time of liberation and release of God's grace. And it's time for us to put on this new heart, this heart of love. Amen.